whole world is in war here, basically. So they took this opportunity, as it were, to actually, blow up as many places as possible, and in a almost mass, ritual sacrifice thing, kill as many people as possible.
That's right. Let's look at, for example, the German invasion of Russia. Now, the Russian people, they weren't communists. Only 1% of that population was communist. The Communist Party ruled Russia. And how did it rule Russia? It ruled it through the NKVD. The NKVD was run by Jesuits, using certain open Jews to make it look like the Jews ran the NKVD. But the general of the NKVD was a general by the name of Nikolai Vlasic. Nikolai Vlasic was a Gentile, a Russian, and he was the overseer of the NKVD when the NKVD and the Gestapo worked together after they had divided Poland to kill 15,000 Polish Roman Catholic true nationalists, shooting them in the back of the head in the forest of Katyn near Smolensk in Russia, and putting them in mass graves. I show in my book that the Gestapo and the NKVD worked together. The Gestapo was under Jesuit Hitler. The NKVD was under Jesuit Beria or Jesuit Vlasic. So they both were working together for the elimination of patriotic Roman Catholic Poles who could have truly been a fight against the Russians. This is why they killed Sikorsky. General Sikorsky. General Sikorsky heard of this massacre of his own men, and he demanded to know if Stalin did this. And because of his persistent demand that Stalin was behind this, Churchill and his British SIS had Sikorsky killed. His aircraft went down in the sea, I believe, when it took off from Gibraltar, and that was the end of General Sikorsky and the end of all real resistance to Soviet Russia being on the side of the Allies. So I cover in my book the assassination of these key generals like Sikorsky, like Japanese General Yamamoto, like American General George Patton, like German General Rommel, like French Admiral Jean Darlin. I show how all these great generals were murdered because they were not playing ball by betraying their own people and doing what they were told from the top.
They had their own ideas, I guess.
They wanted their own country to win. Rommel didn't want to see Germany destroyed. Rommel was a Protestant. Rommel was the one that said, this issue with the Jews has to stop. Rommel was the one who wanted all his troops there at Normandy. He knew they were going to attack Normandy. What did they do? They removed him. And so Rommel then is sent back to Berlin, and he's told to commit suicide, or else we're going to kill your family. So Rommel was murdered. Rommel was a great German patriot and a great German soldier, and he had respect among his enemies. When the Italians, I believe, were stealing from the British POWs in North Africa, Rommel made them give everything they stole back to the British.
Really?
He was chivalrous, that's right. So we have, and Patton knew very good and well that Russia would be a threat to us, so he wanted to invade Russia. Russia was the Jesuits' kindergarten to build this huge military war machine to ultimately be used against America. So Patton cannot be allowed to live, so what happens? The OSS is behind a wreck. He's put into the hospital, and he's given an injection of cyanide. According to a former OSS officer by the name of Bazata, and I quote him in my book. So these key military men were murdered by the intelligence community that the Jesuits control. I show in my book that the Jesuits control the international intelligence community, which was being built and perfected during World War II, which is British Secret Service, the Russian KGB, the American CIA, the Israeli Mossad, the Canadian SIS, the German BND. They're all working together at the top, carrying out their various murders and assassinations, keeping the politicians in line. Any agents get out of hand, like this recent Russian agent who was killed in England?
Litvinenko, or?
Litvinenko, they murdered him. The British SIS killed him in conjunction with the FSB, the Soviet FSB. So they're all working together to neutralize anybody that can bring evidence against them.
Beyond the fact that we can, so to speak, see what the fruits of their labor or work actually is, and we can ourselves connect the dots with
That's right.
where this actually is going. But my question is there any clear, evidence? For those who want to read about this, that the CIA in that regard, or that the KGB or that the Mossad actually are working at top levels? Is there documentation?
I have it in my book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have it in my book. I show you, for example, the collusion between the OSS, the NKVD, and British MI6 during World War II.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, at the end of World War II, even after Potsdam, then all of a sudden in 1946, ipso facto, there's a Cold War. All of a sudden, Russia becomes a huge enemy of the West.
Mm-hmm.
I would remind the listeners, Russia is in shambles. They just lost 20 million of their best people.
Mm-hmm.
All the churches have been destroyed. They've destroyed, I think, some 6,000 hospitals. There's no infrastructure in Russia. Nothing. They cannot even growing their own food. You mean to tell me that Soviet Russia is a real enemy of America, the greatest colossus of economic might in the world, and top in all technology? How absurd! It's an insult to the thinking of any man.
Well, that's right. We have the idea that they actually, this is, I'm laughing here, but...
So what happened? Oh, no. After the World War II, what does America do? It builds Russia. One thing after another, sends them grain, technology. Give Stalin the nuclear device. And this is documented in one of Roosevelt's sons' books.
Really?
And so the American government, controlled by the Vatican through the CFR, gave Stalin the nuclear device so he could detonate it, and then all of a sudden Russia could be a great threat, and now we're going to be afraid of airborne nuclear war, so we have to let the Russians, the Soviets, carry out their inquisition.
Yeah.
Against all the Eastern European peoples, killing millions of people. And remember, the Germans, they sent hundreds of thousands of Lutheran Germans off to Siberia during the Cold War, when we could have stopped that immediately. One letter to the Pope. You either stop this, or we're going to send our ships to the Rome. We're going to bomb the Vatican. So you stop persecuting all those German Lutherans. You stop sending all those patriotic Roman Catholic Hungarians to Siberia like in 1956. The story of 1956 is that the CIA, headed by Knight of Malta Alan Dulles, whose brother, Knight of Malta John Foster Dulles, was the pen holder for Eisenhower, that traitor, who killed approximately 2 million Germans after World War II in his concentration camps. So what happens is Alan Dulles incites the insurrection in Hungary, in Roman Catholic Hungary, so that the people will want to throw off a Soviet occupation. And what happens at the last minute? Why, the CIA betrays all these Hungarian patriots into the hands of the KGB and the GRU so that they can be taken off, killed or tortured in Siberia, further cementing the grip of Russia, of the USSR on Hungary. The same thing is done in Czechoslovakia in 1968 with Dubek. They want to throw off the chains of Russia. The CIA betrays them, and they get to go off to Siberia. The same thing is done in Cuba in 1961, when all the Cuban patriots want to invade and overthrow Castro, who's been trained by Jesuits for 7 years. He is a Jesuit, put in power by the CIA. And what happens is they're incited to invade, and at the last minute, that evil skull and bonesman, McGeorge Bundy, cancels the order, cancels the air cover, and all those patriotic Cubans are betrayed, solidifying the rule of Castro. This is called setting up. The same thing is done with the Contras in Nicaragua. They set them up, they finance them, the Knights of Malta are all behind them, all to be sacrificed to the Sandinistas. This is called bringing out the real resistance to your tyranny that you've established, telling them you're going to help them overthrow that tyranny, and then at the final hour betraying them into the hands of their enemies, who are in fact your friends that you set up in power.
Modern example, Al-Qaeda?
Absolutely. Al-Qaeda was the creation of the CIA. There is no Al-Qaeda or bin Laden without the CIA. And, of course, bin Laden, the family of the bin Ladens were in business with the Bush family for 25 years.
That's right.
There was the Carlyle Group.
Mm.
And so they create this false enemy of Al-Qaeda when it's really nothing more than CIA-controlled Muslims, to then blame this Al-Qaeda for the bringing down of the World Trade Center, which was done by George W. Bush, overseen by Knight of Malta, George J. Tenet, CIA DCI director, and George J. Tenet's master is Edward Cardinal Egan of New York City, and he is overseen by the Jesuits at Fordham University. Mm-hmm. Remember, every archbishop is overseen by a Jesuit university or provincial nearby.
Hmm.
And so now this is blamed on Al-Qaeda. Now we get to justify a war into Afghanistan and ultimately Iraq, because the end game of this war in Iraq, the end game of this war in Iraq, one of them is the rebuilding of the ancient treasure commercial city of Babylon.
Yeah, that's right. But some people said that to some extent that Saddam actually was doing that himself. But I guess since he was again business partnered with the U.S. way back when.
That's right. Same was. Remember, let's look at Iraq for a second.
Mm.
Iraq did not persecute certain gospel preaching missionaries. They didn't persecute them. The Jesuits came in there. They started the University of Baghdad, I believe out of the Maryland province here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens? The Jesuits are accused of meddling in the politics of Iraq. And so what does the Shiite leadership do? It expels the Jesuits from Iraq in 1969.
Hmm.
Well, when you expel the Jesuits from your country, you can expect to be invaded.
Yeah.
And that is what they did. They set up Saddam Hussein as their dictator.
Mm-hmm.
He tortured and killed hundreds of thousands of them, who were probably true patriots and nationalists.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, the Bible teaches nationalism. A nation is a race, a language, and a culture of people with geographic borders. That is what a nation is.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the United States is not a nation. It's a compendium of about 100 nations. That's why we cannot stand. And so when Iraq did this, they were on the hit list. And then after Saddam Hussein did his work, why, then they simply removed him. They captured a double.
Mm-hmm.
They killed his double. And Saddam Hussein's probably on the French Riviera sipping wine right about now.
You think so?
And Iraq is going through hell.
Yeah, that's right.
But this, by the way, this is a turkey shoot. It's estimated that 1 million Iraqis now have been killed by the American occupiers. Okay, and this is a war of annihilation for the purpose of ultimately, after this, building Babylon on the Euphrates River, the beginning of which is the building of Dubai, of which no Jew is allowed to even visit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, because I've seen a few photographs. There are not that many. There might be a lot of them on the web. I haven't seen them all, certainly, but of some areas now in Iraq actually are almost cornered off with giant walls, and behind the walls they're building up these beautifully architecture with beautiful buildings in some areas, at least, that where the main fighting isn't still going on. And this is interesting again, because this then does give us the hint or the idea that many people at the top they're well rehearsed, as it were, in the Bible, and they're way into even the mythologies of the ancient world to some extent, because they're rebuilding these ancient empires again. That's correct, and the Bible teaches that Babylon will be rebuilt. We see it in Jeremiah 51. We see it in Revelation 18. Babylon of Revelation 17 is the Roman Catholic institution. The Babylon of Revelation 18 is the extension of the Roman Catholic institution into commercial Babylon that they establish on the Euphrates River, most assuredly. So yes, that's what they're doing. And that's one of the major purposes for this war, to weaken and destroy the West